I've even seen somebody injure their uke quite severely.
What?
To the point where they had to drive to hospital like immediately.
Wow. That's insane.
And it was like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
And do you know what happened?
Welcome to the Partizan podcast. I'm George. This is Ben. Today we're talking, are belt promotion ceremonies a scam? Ben, are belt promotion ceremonies a scam?
Yes, if you have to pay for them.
Whoa. Okay. Tell me more.
You shouldn't have to pay to get a blue belt or a purple belt. You've already paid your dues.
Right.
What do you think? Should they even be done at all is another interesting question. First off, let's just get this out of the way. Do you think it's ever appropriate to pay for a stripe or pay for a new belt?
Respectfully, if you're paying for a stripe, you should get yourself examined.
It happens.
It happens? That's common? To pay
Gym.
per stripe?
I might edit that out. Someone's old gym that I know of. Shoot, they were paying $50 per stripe.
$50
at white belt, and they chose to get 2 stripes at once for $100.
That's a good
Hit
deal.
them with a double deal.
Kind of be like 2 stripes for the price of, or 3 stripes for the price of 2.
There's no deal, brother. For this gym, they decided when to grade themselves with stripes. So there would be gradings, say quarterly, say every 3 months, and the members would come and say, time for my second stripe. Here's $50. They would do a test. So there's a printed laminated sheet saying your first stripe, you're going to show these 10 techniques. The second stripe, you're going to show these 7 techniques, whatever. They would have a curriculum. But they would choose when they graded their own stripes based on the grading. They would pay for it. They would do the test. I don't think anyone has ever failed the test. And that's another thing we can talk about. Is it really a test if you can't fail?
The answer to that is no.
I think it's no as well. So why are we calling
Did
it
I
a
pass
test?
your test?
Yes, you passed my test on that question. But is it really a test if you can fail? Let's just outline what a belt test might look like in case anyone's listening and they haven't. Have you ever had to test for a belt?
I've done 1 test in my life.
Tell me how it went. Did you pass?
I did pass,
That's good.
So that was for my blue belt, and so we had a group. They put like on the gym sort of walls. They put these people are the people that are grading. They get the
You had a grading day?
to grade, yeah, So it was a group of us, and you had to do a bunch of things from the curriculum. It was like a set out curriculum, and you quickly realized, holy moly, like I don't use a lot of these things. And then your whole next month is you preparing for this test to make sure you're ready for this test. And you're not even doing classes anymore because you're preparing for this test. Like everyone's doing a class, you're on the side of the mat practicing with somebody that you're going to do this test with. And it was like one of those things where I was like, this is I just want my blue belt, to be honest. And then once the experience was over, I thought it was a cool experience. It was nice in a particular way because you went through something with other people and so on. So there is something nice about it. Great. But in reality, it's like, it's so lame. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you have to test for your belt, like, it's just so demeaning to an adult. Like, why as an adult do I have to do this 14 different moves, or in some people's case 88 different moves to get this belt? And on top of that, it's just sort of implied and not even discussed, but then you kind of find out that this test costs money.
Did you have to pay for it?
Yeah, to pay $70, I think,
$70
for my...
Does it escalate with the belt?
I don't know, because I only graded one time.
Those are my favorite ones.
And it's like, well, what are you gonna do? Like, of course you're gonna do it. Of course you're gonna pay. But the whole thing felt like a scam to me. I'm sorry. Like,
that's disappointing.
How did you feel? Have you ever done a test before?
I've done 2 tests. I tested for my blue belt and for my purple belt. The blue belt test, I actually felt like it had some benefit to it because it was maybe 25, 30 techniques, and it was kind of all encompassing. You'd have escapes from every position and kind of transitions from every position. I did feel like drilling those techniques that I wasn't particularly comfortable with did help. like having the pressure of having to, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, having that pressure of having to display it in front of the whole gym in a few weeks or a few months did put some focus into drilling the technique. One of the problems I have with gradings is that I'm practicing how a technique looks. My whole thing is the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which basically means we're doing kata.
Yeah.
So as jiu-jitsu guys, we like to make fun of karate. Sometimes a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms, particularly self-defense gyms, will make fun of karate, saying that, you know, it's not realistic. You're just standing there throwing punches at midair.
Yeah.
That's basically the same thing. We have a completely non-resisting opponent. We're trying to match an aesthetic quality to that technique. So you might have a very effective guard pass, but if it doesn't look like the one that the coach showed, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And you need to change what you're doing to do it like the coach showed, because they've decided that's the way you do a Toriando pass. Like the way I've said it is the way you do it. And I think that's completely counterproductive. The other thing, and I've mentioned this, is I would have a lot more respect for the test if you could fail it. And if people did fail it.
Yeah.
I feel like that would make it more legitimate, because I've seen some shocking tests in my time. I've seen some shocking ones. Actually, shout out Nick Pan. He had one of the worst tests I've ever seen. And it was bad for Nick because he'll admit it too. It was bad because he just didn't. I don't think he prepared for it. But he was doing it by himself because he missed the grading day. So he had to redo. It was like an Anzac Day open mat or something. So everyone's looking just at Nick. And like a lot of people have, I don't know if Nick does or not, but a lot of people have anxiety when it comes to performance and tests. So you might be a really good driver, but if you do a driving test, you get very, very nervous. It's very common. But regardless, it was just like really wasn't a good test, unfortunately. But he still got his belt, just like every other test I've ever seen. I've never seen somebody fail one of these tests. I've even seen somebody injure their uke quite severely.
What?
In a blue belt test. It was a hip bump sweep.
Yeah.
So you're in closed guard, you sit up for the hip bump, you collect the arms so they can't post it on the mat, and you sweep them. This person did the hip bump, but didn't collect the person's arm. The uke, for whatever reason, had their arm posted, but the person followed through with the sweep.
Yeah.
And it injured this person's elbow quite severely, to the point where they had to drive to hospital like immediately.
Wow. That's insane.
And it was like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
And do you know what happened?
What happened?
You okay? Finish the test.
There you go.
Here's your blue belt.
Anything to get that money, Ben.
Yeah. So that's what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing?
Is
it a real test?
That's why I say it's demeaning. Like, if you're an adult preparing for a test that you can't fail, to have the privilege to wear a new piece of fabric and give your instructors some money, it's very demeaning.
Yeah. I think that the money thing is really what leaves like a bad taste in the mouth. Like, you've been paying your dues for quite some time. And I've mentioned this. Belts are about $15 wholesale.
Yeah.
Just so everyone knows out there. Like, I've bought a lot of belts.
How much is
for
tape?
this gym. How much is tape? Great. $50 per 2 inches. Tape's very expensive, George. It's the very special tape from Brazil.
Yeah.
But it's purely, and the reason why it's a bad taste is you can't opt out of it.
Yeah.
You literally have so much social pressure. Imagine saying no. Imagine your coach says, "Hey, George, you're ready for the blue belt. So it'll be $70. We'll do it next week."
Yeah.
And you're like, "No, thanks."
Mm.
That's very, very awkward. I think if you're charging, I think if you're not charging for a belt test, there can be discussions about the benefits to it. What do you think? What if I was to implement, if I was to say, hey, whenever at Partizan here, we're going to start implementing grading days, and I want to see a list of these 30 techniques, what would your honest thoughts on that be and why?
Look, I'm not a big fan of testing, but I can understand that from a perspective of, somebody wants to maybe teach jiu-jitsu, something like this. Maybe then it's, you as the owner of the gym, you think, okay, I just need to see that you understand these things to some degree, because if you understand them in terms of at least demonstrating them accurately, you can at least teach them to some degree. But there's just something about that. It's like, man, when you do a belt test, like realistically, why do you need to know 88 moves? Like,
you love that number.
Yeah.
Can we provide context for that number?
That's your story. Are you wanna
later? Oh, sorry, I'll let you finish your thought.
Yeah. just as a normal person, like, why do you need to demonstrate that you can do some move that you realistically never do and never want to do? Like, what is the point of it? I can't think of a point of it. Like,
Perhaps it adds legitimacy to the outside observer to say, if anyone questions if this person's a real purple belt, you can point to the video and say, look, they did the test. You know what I think it actually is? I think it stems from the affiliation model of, let's say I make an affiliation. We've got Partizan grappling affiliation. I start a gym in here in Sydney, but we go worldwide, get to the point where I'm a 4th degree black belt, and now I have the job of giving out black belts. I've spoken about this before, and it's kind of not really addressed as much as I think it should be. A lot of affiliation heads will give out black belts to people they've never met. So I might have an affiliation in LA, in America, and I might have several. I might have 100 gyms. And these purple belts, brown belts, black belts that are training at my affiliation overseas, I might have never met them, or perhaps only met them once or twice. So if I'm to give them a black belt, it would not look very good if I took a plane ride to LA, gave the guy a black belt that I've never met, and then just fucked off back to Sydney. Because people would start the question being like, well, how can you determine he's a black belt? You've never met him. But if I make him do a 2-hour test, it's ticked the box of legitimacy. Now I can give the guy a black belt, and he can say he's a Partizan black belt.
yeah, in theory, that's ticking the box. But ultimately, what it's just doing is ticking a box.
It just looks like it's ticking. It ticks the box. Even if that person might be a terrible grappler.
Yeah.
But they can put together, they've practiced the techniques for long enough. So for context of the 88 techniques, when I graded to purple belt, it was under the Pedro Sauer system, is I was given a test of 88 techniques. And it took 3 or 4 months of practice to learn all these techniques, because I'd only realistically been using maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of the techniques in my actual game. So my game is more modern. This game was more either self-defense or orientated around the gi. And I had to completely learn these from scratch. And the frustrating point about this is I spent so long preparing for the test. When the grading day came, for whatever reason, the head black belt who was grading said, oh, do like these 3. Okay, did those 3. Do these 4. Did those 4. Do these 2. Do these 2. Said, all right, now start and mount and just roll. So the other guy I was grading with was going for purple. We were just specific training from the back, from the mount, from the guard. Here's the ironic part. I actually think that's a good way to grade someone, because you get to see them roll. It was actually like a pressure tested on the spot against another prospective purple belt. The annoying part for me was, why the fuck did I just spend 3 months learning these 88 techniques if you didn't even want to see them? That was frustrating to me. But it made me think maybe belts should just be, you roll with a white belt, the belt grading would be, you roll with a white belt, you roll with a blue belt, you roll with a purple belt, you roll with a brown belt, you roll with a black belt, back to back, and we see how you go.
That's an interesting way to go. Yeah.
Almost a crucible, you'd say.
Yeah, classic. Shout out to Roy.
Shout out Roy Dean if you're in the comments. I do think it's an entertaining video to watch. And I think people... But here's the thing. I'd love to know which of these affiliations are failing people. Because I want to see and hear about people that have gone to the assessment and not made it.
Well, it's not an assessment.
But it should be.
It's just a ritual.
If you're going to call it a test, make it a test.
It's belt ritual.
It's a ritual. Call it a demonstration then.
Demonstration, yeah. Well, why are we doing this demonstration?
That's a great question.
Waste of everybody's time.
Waste of 3 or 4 months, really.
If I'm in primary school, test me all you want. That's great. I'm going to learn something. If I'm 28 years old and you're forcing me to do 40 moves, and I've brought my wife and kids to watch me grade for my blue belt, but it's just something demeaning and embarrassing about it.
That's a monumental day. I like the certificates too. Have you seen the certificates?
Yeah.
Do you think they put them up on the fridge?
Yeah, I would frame mine.
Do you frame yours?
I'm sure I've got my blue belt one.
They gave you I didn't get a certificate.
I got a certificate, man. I'm certified blue belt, brother.
Okay, this leads to an interesting question, George. Before we go on tangents about whether belts should exist, that's another question for another episode. But how do you think a coach should assess when someone should get a blue belt?
Ben, I have no clue. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
Really?
Honestly, I've seen a few people in the gym, and I've said, "Oh, Ben, like XYZ looks like, if like they could be a blue belt soon."
How'd you assess that?
But honestly, it's just like a feeling. It's
Yeah.
not rooted in anything particular. And that's my problem with all of these things. Like it's like like I used to ask like people like, so what's the difference between a purple belt and a brown belt? And they're like, or a brown belt and a black belt. And there's
About $200.
There's yeah. Like there's never anything like there's never a concrete answer. And it's always just this weird, like, oh, from a from a brown belt to a black belt, things are a bit smoother and refined. Like it's all this like very like broad general language, and you actually have no idea what it means.
That's why we test them. I just had a thought that kind of puts the nail in the coffin for belt tests. Do you want to hear it?
Oh, I'd love to hear a bit.
If I'm a blue belt, but I can look at the black belt grading test and I can practice it for 6 months and I can put on a borderline identical black belt test to the actual black belts, shouldn't I get a black belt?
I think you should.
Okay, that's if you want to skip all the other belt ranks as a blue belt, just do the black belt test. Ask them, hey, I'll give you $1,000 now. We'll save the time.
Yeah.
I'm a busy man.
Yeah.
I've been training for 2 years. I'm pretty good.
That's right.
So what I'll do is I'll give you $1,000 and then I'll get my black belt by doing the black belt test, held to your standard, the same standard as any other black belt. And you could have a blue belt demonstrate those techniques if they had enough practice.
Yeah.
But they would absolutely get destroyed by a black belt in training.
Yeah. Which is odd because I did my black belt test and I could do all of the moves. So
Yeah,
I've
should be a black belt.
demonstrated it in front of you. Yeah.
I think it is a feeling, though, about when I kind of agree with you. It's two things for me, and I'm still deciding on exactly how to grade people. But if you train with enough blue belts, you get a kind of feel of what a blue belt feels like.
Respectfully, what the hell does that mean, Ben?
It's like, how hard do I have to resist?
Yeah.
In order to sweep, submit, pass this person on a scale of 1 to 10. It's not actually on a scale, but
yeah.
surely you understand what I'm saying. Do you not see it that way?
In some sense, I do, but in another sense, like this all just seems so like nebulous and like just not rooted in anything.
But how do you root it in anything? How do you make a perfect system? Okay, George, you're in charge of you're in charge of an affiliation now. I've handed the keys over to you.
Yeah.
When do you decide when to grade people? And you have to decide. You're now in charge. You're head coach at Partizan now.
Honestly, I haven't given this that much thought because
you're on the spot now. You have
don't care about the belt system all that much. Not that I want to take away the belts. Like I think the belts should stay. It's cool. I think generally speaking, the way judo does it, it's a bit more like it's so much better.
They have like a point system where they have to compete.
Yeah, you compete to get your belt, and I think it's very realistic in judo to get your black belt in 5 years. Then after 5 years, it's just how good of a black belt are you?
Yeah.
Instead of in jiu-jitsu, we have this we just idolize this journey of 10 years to get your black belt, and generally you can get it in 10 years, and eventually you get your black belt. And then it's like, who cares, man? Like, there's so many black belts that are just not good.
A lot of people care, George.
Yeah, no, a lot of people care.
People cry when they get their black belts. It's a monumental situation for some people.
Yeah. I'm not saying it wouldn't mean anything to me either.
Sure.
If I got my black belt. But just respectfully, why is it taking 10 years? And like I said, with the judo system, it's not you get to your black belt in about 5 years. You compete, you get points to get your belts, etc. So at least it's rooted in something,
I like the idea. Actually, Absolute MMA have done this. And I know Keller at Grappling Education has talked about this too, in varying degrees. But they host a tournament where it's submission only. Or they've discussed this. It's hosting a tournament where it's submission only. And how does it work? If you want to get your purple belt, you have to submit every blue belt in that bracket.
I think it's I think that comes from judo. So in judo you can do, and correct me if I'm wrong, judokas. I know judokas
correct them right now in the comments. I want to hear about how George is wrong.
I know judokas love to correct
they don't
things.
like us.
But I think in judo there's something like if you can get an ippon on 5 black belts, you can get your black belt.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
it's a sort of a similar scenario where if you're a blue belt and you can submit 5 blue belts in a row, you can get your purple belt.
That would be
Something like
cool. To be like, you have to go to Grappling Industries, compete in the higher division, and submit. I don't know,
Yeah.
have some sort of litmus to it. It'd
Yeah.
be interesting.
I'd have
It
no
reminds
issues
me
with
of
that.
Pokemon, where you have to go to the enemy like gyms,
Yeah.
and you have to beat everyone in the gym, and then beat the head of the gym,
Yeah.
and then they give you the badge at the end.
Yeah. I'd have no issues with that.
That sounds cool.
There's some like it's kind of merit based to some degree.
Yeah.
So that's
But
kind
if
of
it's merit based, then there are a lot of people who won't achieve the merit, and if they don't achieve the merit, they stop coming to the gym, and then we run out of money. That's really
Well,
why. That's why you don't
yeah.
fail a belt test.
Yeah, and look, I've got some kind of empathy in terms of it's you're a gym, you're a small business, you're trying to make money, and you don't want to just break even, so you charge for stripes, you charge for belt ceremonies, things like this. So I have some kind of understanding towards that, but I just don't like it.
I don't like it either. I have no understanding. Just make your weekly memberships slightly more expensive, and then pay for it. Make it actually merit based. Because making someone pay. Here's the thing. I paid for my purple belt, and I felt like an idiot
Why? Why did you feel like an idiot?
because I thought I don't agree with this morally that I should be paying for a belt
Why is it wrong? You're paying membership
because I can't say no.
Okay, you can't say no. You're pressured, right?
I'm
It's
pressured.
like a cost.
It would not. It's not appropriate or acceptable to say no, which means you're forcing me to spend money.
It's coerced.
Another thing that happened that we could talk about is that oftentimes these grading events are strategically lined up to be before or during or after a seminar, and the seminar costs $150.
Yeah.
And I had the situation where my grading was at a seminar, and it was like a 3-day workshop that was quite expensive. And I was asked, "Are you going to this 3-day workshop?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And there was a lot of issues with me saying I'm not going to the workshop.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of like, "Why wouldn't you do that?" There was a lot of pressure for me to attend this workshop because it's not a good look if apparently it wasn't a good look if I just came and did the grading and I didn't pay for the 3-day workshop.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not in a financial position to do that. And I also feel quite a bit upset that a lot of people who would have come to watch me grade can't or won't because they don't have $300 to pay for the workshop.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then that's why I was a bit troubled by that because, yeah, I just think you shouldn't combine the two. I think if you want to make more money as a gym owner, I completely understand. It's not easy running a business, but there are other ways to do it. I think you can make merchandise that people love to wear and they choose to wear. I think you can run seminars that people choose to come to, but there needs to be a choice because they haven't signed up for this.
Yeah.
When they come to join the gym, you're telling them this is how much it costs to train. You're not telling them, oh, by the way, you're going to have to come to seminars, you're going to have to come to workshops, you're going to have to pay for a belt, you're going to have to pay for stripes. You're not told that when you join. You're only told that. And that's why I made a joke about the belts getting more expensive because they literally do. They'll say blue belt's $50, purple belt's $200, brown belt's $400, black belt's $800. Now, why would that be the case?
You've bought in more.
You've bought in.
You're not going to say no.
Exactly. You're not going to say no. A blue belt might say, you know what, I'm going to train down the road.
Yeah.
You can't get a black belt down the road in a year. If you're leaving your gym as a brown belt, you've bought into the whole system. So that's why it's fucked up.
Yeah, massively. Well, I've been to a gym in the past where they had a grading coming up, and usually in the grading there are self-defense moves that no one ever practices because even the coaches probably don't care about it and don't believe in it, but it's in the curriculum, so we're going to grade for it, so you have to demonstrate it. So there was I think it was like a $10 or $20 per head symposium run by one of the coaches just about the self-defense side of things. So you can pay your $10 for a 2-hour symposium on the self-defense.
What's a symposium? I've never heard that word in my life.
Until I...
Is that actually a word? Can someone shout out? If there's someone Google symposium in the comments and let me know. Actually, what does that mean?
I searched it up at the time. It's something. It's like similar, I think it's like similar to a seminar, but it's on like a specific thing, and it's like sort of a physical demonstrated thing. I don't know. Correct me in the comments.
Yeah, I've seen this done as well. I've seen like
it's a real thing.
blue belt workshops where it's heavily heavily implied that if you're grading soon to blue belt, or if you were a blue belt elsewhere, I've seen this before. We can talk about this. If you were a blue belt from another academy and you join the gym,
Yeah.
they make you do the blue belt test. Have you seen this?
No.
Really?
No.
Because you're not a legitimate blue belt.
That's insane.
Because you're not a blue belt from us. So if you want to go up the ranks,
Mm.
it's a requirement now for you to do this test at the blue belt level, because we don't know that you're a real blue belt.
Yeah, that's insane. That's
So
just
not only are you being tested, we don't even validate your previous. You might have done another test. You're doing a second completely different test.
wild stuff.
Wild stuff.
Wild stuff.
Let us know in the comments how you feel about belt tests. I do see some merit to, like, look, I mentioned with the blue belt test, I see some merit in having people work on particular. Here's the thing, it has to be working on skills. I don't think I was working on skills when I did my preparation for the grading.
You're doing a little katas.
I'm doing katas. I would love to see a discussion, a more open discussion between coach and student, where they say, hey, what do you think I should be focusing on before progressing? And a coach saying, your takedowns are really good. Your guard passing is great. I'm noticing that your open guard needs some work, and your defense from bottom mount needs some work. So I'd like you to focus on that. And then they implement that in the training room to literally improve their skills. And then that's when that discussion is had, where it's, for whatever reason, it's completely unacceptable to ask your coach. Now, look, I can understand it being unacceptable to ask a coach, when am I getting my belt? Of course. But it's completely unacceptable, it seems, to even ask, what do I need to do to get a purple belt?
Yeah, which is insane. It's so weird. It's like,
Shouldn't you be able to have that discussion?
yeah, because you're basically asking, what do I need to do to get better?
Yes.
And you're saying you can't ask me that.
Yeah, don't ask me that. Every time you ask me that, it delays it by 6 months.
That's
You hear
like
that
a
joke?
classic.
You hear
Yeah,
that joke?
that's a classic. I don't know how much that was even a joke, to be honest.
I don't think it's a joke either. I think when you're punished for being proactive about your own skills.
Yeah.
It's a valid question. And I have people ask me when they join, they say, hey, I'm from another gym where I have 3 stripes. And they're like, what does that mean here? And I'm like, absolutely nothing. I'm sorry, but your stripes, what do they mean? Like, and they ask, and I tell them honestly, because they say I've been training for a year and a half, and they kind of subtly ask about gradings. And I say, look, we grade based on merit. There's no strict test. There's no strict formula. There's no strict grading day. When the coaches deem that you're worthy of a blue belt, you'll get a blue belt. But you can always ask, what should I be working on? Particularly if you're like rolling with that person, it's a good time to ask afterwards. So if this person's rolling with us as coaches, we can train with them, and they'll say, hey, is there anything you think I should be working on? We can give them actual practical advice on what to work on. And I just tell them, just focus on getting better. Get really good.
Yeah.
Get so good we can't deny you a blue belt or a purple belt or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you should focus on. You should be focusing on what you can control. You can't control when we grade you. You can control the way that you train and how you develop skills. So that should be your only focus.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Like, and the dark side of this thing too is sometimes you'll get somebody that's they're a brown belt now, and all of a sudden they're not getting their black belt for 4 years because the coaches are scared that you're gonna open up a gym close by and take their business.
Shout out anyone that's opened a gym close by and taken all the business. Shout out. No, that's a good point though. There's a lot of politics behind, particularly grading to black belt. That becomes a very nebulous thing of like, what are you going to do? Are you going to open a school for me?
Yeah.
Are you going to continue to teach here, or will you open a school by yourself? Now, look, I'm not a black belt, so I haven't been part of those conversations, but I'm sure that that's a huge influence. I've seen even a situation where this person, I was quite ashamed to be honest, and it really, again, it leaves a bad taste. This person went to a gym as a 4-stripe purple belt, and they'd been training for like a very long time, whatever. And they were asking, what do I need to do to get to a brown belt? Exactly like I mentioned, they were saying, what do I need to do? And the coach told this person, well, we grade people, we have a minimum standard of, I think it was 500 hours of training to grade people to brown belt. So you'll need to train with us for 500 hours, and then you'll be asked to grade for your brown belt. This person did 500 hours over the course of like maybe 2.5 years, and said, I've just done 500 hours. And they said, no. They said no.
That's brutal.
They said no, and this person left the gym.
That's insane.
They've just wasted. I mean, look, they've trained, but they've essentially wasted. For them, it was very important to progress through the ranks.
Yeah.
They asked very clearly, what do I need to do? What's your expectations of me? They were told a very clear expectation. They reached that expectation. And then they were told, no, we've changed our mind. There's actually more to it. And it was very, I think I wasn't part of the conversation, but I think it was quite nebulous in terms of what that actually meant.
Yeah.
I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, that's insane. I've seen many fallouts over belts and miscommunications and politics. Yeah, maybe let us know in the comments what's your grading story, what's your belt story.
How much did you pay for your brown belt?
Yeah,
88 techniques. Does anyone have any test larger than 88 techniques? I want to know the largest test that someone's ever had to do. And I want to know if you actually enjoyed doing a test and you think it was a worthwhile thing to do. Here's another thing, just before we end. I think it's really fun to give someone a belt and it's a surprise. I think that's really fun. We've done that just a few times and it's been such a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Because instead of them stressing about this assessment, because a lot of people get stressed.
Yeah.
And they're like, just every day they're just slogging towards this. They just want to get it over and done with by the end of it, right? Instead of that, they just come into a gym on a Thursday. They might have had a long day at work, but they decided to come to the gym. They're rolling with their friends. Everything's going well. And then they get the belt comes out and they don't think that they never think they're the ones getting promoted. They're always like, oh, it's someone else.
Yeah.
And then their name gets called out and they're like super stoked and everyone around them super stoked. I don't know. I just think there's no better way to do it than that. There's no better way.
There's something special about that too, right? Instead of when there's a grading day, and everyone's testing for their belts, you just feel like you're like in a factory or something, right? Whereas if you get it like a surprise in the way you're describing, you're the only person that gets the belt that day. And there's just something so special where it's like, okay, all the coaches decided together, we're going to give this person a belt today, and they've deserved it, and put that spotlight on them. There's just something so special and personalized about that, as opposed to you're just a piece of cattle moving along.
Next.
Move along, give us $70.
Blue belt, next.
Yeah.
Oh, the blue belts took too long, so we're going to cut the purple belt one short. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. It's your day, and you've done the work. That's the most important thing for us, is you've proven yourself to us already. We don't need your money. We don't need your test. You've done the work. Like, we can feel and see the progress you've made. And for you, it's worthwhile to have that milestone. And then everyone gets super stoked about it. I think there's no better way than that.
I think that's very well said, Ben, and a good way to end the podcast.
Good way to end the podcast. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.
Now we talk off camera.